If you're a fan of the original Nintendo Entertainment System, then you've probably played at least a couple of the Disney-Capcom games. These games were very popular in their day and have managed to stay relevant now because of a notable remaster in 2013 and the 2017 release of the Disney Afternoon Collection. Today, I'm talking about the game that kicked off the very successful partnership between Disney and Capcom. It's DuckTales. Woo! DuckTales first came out for the NES in North America in September 1989, and about a year later was ported to the Game Boy. It's a platformer where you play Scrooge McDuck, who's searching for lost treasures that will increase his fortune. When looking at how the DuckTales game came to be, we have to go all the way back to 1947. That's when the character Scrooge McDuck was created by Carl Barks, working for the Disney Company. He first appeared in a Donald Duck comic in a story called Christmas on Bear Mountain. Named after Ebenezer Scrooge from A Christmas Carol, he is Donald Duck's uncle and was presented as old, miserly, and misanthropic, traits which would soften considerably over the years. In 1952, he got his own self-titled comic. Here, he became more of a philanthropist and explorer, often going on adventures with his young nephews Huey, Dewey, and Louie. Now, in 2019, the Uncle Scrooge comic is still being published. In 1986, Disney decided to capitalize on the popularity of Uncle Scrooge and started working on an animated series. Many episodes focused on Scrooge and his nephews seeking out treasures, or preventing his nemesis from stealing his fortune in order to stay the richest duck in the world. He's very single-minded in his capitalist pursuits. Animation for the series was farmed out to Wang Film Productions, a Taiwanese-American studio who started out doing work for Hanna-Barbera, and would go on to animate shows like Bobby's World and Rugrats. The quality of the animation was much higher than most cartoons of the time, and also much more expensive. Running for 100 episodes over 4 seasons, DuckTales was incredibly successful for Disney, and they would go on to commission similar cartoons, like Rescue Rangers, Tailspin, and Darkwing Duck. These shows would also go on to be made into video games. Alright, so technically, DuckTales wasn't the first time that the names Capcom and Disney appeared on an NES box together. The first Disney game on the NES was actually Mickey Mousecapades, which came out in North America in 1988. Though looking at the box would make you think that Capcom had made it, it was actually Hudson Soft who developed the game. Capcom only published it in North America. Though the game is similar in format to DuckTales, it's a platformer that has 5 levels, it's not overly impressive in either gameplay or appearance. In DuckTales, you play as Scrooge as he travels around the world looking for 5 lost treasures. He'll visit places from deep in a mine in Africa to the moon. There's no real in-game introduction. As soon as you press start, you'll find yourself on a level selection screen, and you can approach them in any order you like. Though there are only 5 levels, they are all quite large, non-linear, and full of optional secret paths to explore. There are also items which can restore health or give you money, which Scrooge wants to collect as much of as possible. Magic coins can make you invulnerable, and Scrooge dolls can give you extra lives. Scrooge has a health bar which consists of 3 hearts, but this can be expanded by finding hidden objects. If you lose all your health, you'll be sent back to the start of the level. If you lose all your lives, it's game over, and there are no continues. Certain aspects of DuckTales gameplay might remind you of the beginning of another incredibly popular Capcom series, Mega Man. There's the quick start without introduction to the story, the level select screen which allows you to tackle them in any order you choose, the cute facial expressions of the main character. The levels also have a lot of verticality rather than straight left to right side scrolling. DuckTales and Mega Man shared a lot of the same developers, and DuckTales likely even used the Mega Man engine. Tokuro Fujiwara produced DuckTales, Mega Man, and most Capcom games of this time, including future Disney games. Graphic design on DuckTales was done by Keiji Inafune, who is often known as the father of Mega Man, and is credited as the character designer on the early games. Both DuckTales and the first two Mega Man games were programmed by Nobuyuki Matsushima and had Yoshihiro Sakaguchi as the sound producer. Despite sharing much of the same development team, DuckTales still stands on its own as a unique game. In terms of gameplay, it's your basic platformer, but with one big twist. Scrooge can use his cane as a pogo stick in order to jump higher, traverse dangerous terrain, destroy obstacles, and take out enemies by jumping on their heads. He can also swing it like a golf club in order to launch items directly in front of him. How you get on with the pogo mechanic will probably be the biggest factor in how much you enjoy the game. When I first played DuckTales, which was just a few years ago, I did not like this pogo mechanic at all. At this point, I had already played the remaster, maybe even played Shovel Knight, and I just found the execution here really awkward, and I quickly abandoned the game. Even the game's manual makes the pogoing sound complicated and awkward, as it dedicates 4 paragraphs to explaining how to jump. Seriously, 4 paragraphs about jumping in a game with a 2-button controller. Recently, I decided I wanted to give the game another chance and give myself time to get used to it. This time around, I found it much more enjoyable and could appreciate more of the game's positives. DuckTales has a great style, and I love how expressive Scrooge's sprite is, especially when taking damage. Enemy designs are unique and often have interesting animations. I particularly love what happens when you take out a mummy duck. It spins around and unravels, leaving a bear duck behind. And even though I generally like a more linear platformer, I appreciated the different paths and all the hidden items there were to find, including 2 secret treasures. Diamonds and other items often seem to appear right out of thin air as you go around the levels, so exploration and constant jumping were always being rewarded. And while I didn't like the pogoing at first, the Himalayas level really drives home how important it is to the feel of the game. Here you're going through deep snow, and any attempt to pogo will just make you sink into it. Things slow down considerably and become a lot less fun when you can't use this mechanic. I found the difficulty curve a little bit strange, though technically there's no first level since you can pick any of the 5. The first one listed is the Amazon, so that's where I started. I found this level so much harder than the rest of them. Those pesky bees flying at me as I tried to climb vines and pogo across tiny platforms meant I had to play through it a number of times before succeeding. I was a little surprised when I got to Transylvania, the mines, and Himalayas and found everything so much easier. Each level ends with a boss fight, and these can be a little samey. Though the enemies themselves are very visually distinct, beating them is just a matter of pogoing on their heads a number of times. Though I guess if Super Mario Bros. 3 can get away with this, I can't hold it against DuckTales. You do have to hit everything more than 3 times though. These are fairly minor complaints I have, and overall, DuckTales is quite good. The real standout level is the moon. Aesthetically, it looks and sounds the best. It's full of cool alien creatures and robots, has a lot of areas with different environments to explore, and it has one of the most well-loved pieces of music on the NES, the moon theme. For fans of the DuckTales animated series or comics, it's also fun to see so many familiar characters in the game, from bosses like Magica Dispel and Flintheart Glomgold to Scrooge's pals. Launchpad can give Scrooge a ride, Mrs. Beakley offers health replenishing snacks, and Gizmo Duck helps out on the moon. Making sure the characters were done right was a big priority for Disney. Though it was Capcom that was ultimately responsible for the game design, Disney was quite hands-on, making sure that DuckTales was properly represented. Each time Disney worked with Capcom on a game, they assigned a producer to make sure the game was Disney enough. On DuckTales, this was Darlene Waddington. Darlene had previously been a designer on the Don Bluth game Dragon's Lair, and would go on to produce more Disney-Capcom games such as Adventures in the Magic Kingdom and Rescue Rangers. As a Disney producer, she was responsible for things like providing line art, making sure dialogue was well crafted, and that the games were relatively free of violence. In an interview, Darlene shared that another licensee developer had included a scene of Donald Duck clubbing baby seals in their game. This was the kind of thing Disney would insist on cutting out. The process for producing Disney-licensed games would involve getting a pre-alpha build and possibly a game spec, and reviewing it to see if any changes were required. In the early days of Disney software, the producer was also responsible for QA, making sure the games were free from bugs, fun to play, and of an appropriate level of challenge for their audience. Darlene has shared that Capcom was a great developer to work with, and that their projects always went smoothly. Getting text and dialogue updates implemented tended to be the biggest hassle, as the developers were more concerned with the gameplay. A prototype of DuckTales from only a few months before the actual release was found to still exist, and was listed on eBay in 2000. The ROM has been dumped and is available online. This is really cool because it means we get to see the kinds of changes that were made. Many of the changes were mostly aesthetic. In the prototype, it's hamburgers that restore your health, while in the release, it's ice cream cones. In the moon level, the prototype has aliens that kind of resemble snakes. While in release, they use a model similar to one that had actually appeared in the animated series, in the episode Where No Duck Has Gone Before. And, as in most North American NES games of the time, crucifixes that originally appeared on the coffins in Transylvania were removed, and replaced with the letters RIP. There were also a number of changes to text. The original level names were quite generic, things like Jungle and Snow Mountain. These were changed to reflect real places like the Amazon and the Himalayas. Much of the dialogue was improved, and in one of the best alterations, the text box for dialogue was changed to span the whole top of the screen, rather than try to squish everything into a tiny box on the right. Some things also had to be changed for accuracy. The game originally referred to a Robo-Duck on the moon, when the character's name is actually Gizmo-Duck. Another significant change was to some of the music, though Darlene has said that this was something Capcom did on their own. The Transylvania theme was completely changed, and the original Moon theme was slower but got sped up in the release version. The funniest thing from the prototype was the ending. In the final screen, Scrooge proclaimed that the greatest treasure is Dream and Friends? All this hard work paid off, and DuckTales would go on to become Capcom's best-selling game on both the NES and the Game Boy, selling approximately 1.5 million copies on each. It received very positive reviews upon release, which praised the graphics, animations, and game design. When there were complaints about it, they tended to point to a lack of difficulty or the short length. In more recent years, DuckTales has been put on innumerable lists of the best NES games. After such a successful first partnership, Disney and Capcom would go on to make more great games together for the NES. Rescue Rangers 1 and 2, Adventures in the Magic Kingdom, Tailspin, The Little Mermaid, Darkwing Duck, and a DuckTales sequel as well. They'd also continue to have a relationship to bring out games on the Super Nintendo, N64, and GameCube, though they worked together less and less as time went on. Nothing lasts forever, but DuckTales marked the start of a very good partnership. That's it. That's the story behind DuckTales, how Disney and Capcom worked together, as well as my thoughts on the game after giving it a second chance. Overall, it's quite fun and charming, and probably one of the best adaptations of an existing property on the NES. Let me know in the comments what your favorite Disney-Capcom game is. If you want to see some more Disney-Capcom games, check out my review of Adventures in the Magic Kingdom or Rescue Rangers. I have a Patreon if you want to support future videos. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.